We don't have to feel that we have to Zoom. We don't have to feel that we have to make a roast and put out all the luxurious items that we might, that we have to appreciate where we're at. And she goes on to say, you're living through an international pandemic. You just don't need to obsess about creating that inspirational, unforgettable Passover experience. Do you have to be wondering, am I being productive? Am I decluttering? Am I running cool activities for my kids? Am I keeping up with my workout routine? I'm giving you with halachic authority, rabbinic permission, and or psychological and spiritual authorization as follows. You are allowed to have a shvach seder. And by shvach, I mean the Yiddish word for mediocre, underwhelming, unremarkable, or even kind of pathetic. And don't feel bad, she goes on to say. Now, Nachama told me that knowing that I have been learning with you in anticipation of Zman Cherutenu, the holiday of our freedom, and Chag HaAviv, the holiday of spring, and Chag HaMatzot, better known as Pesach, she did not want to derail me. And I understood immediately what she meant, because we've been involved, as you have been in other Zooming sessions that you've been participating in, as I see on the website, we've been involved in holy work in this learning, nothing less. Not because I'm teaching it, but because we're involved in one of the most important activities that we should do in such times and when we're not in such times. But I have to tell you, when reading this blog, I immediately recalled the incredible and unbelievable stories from the Shoah. Enslaved inmates doing whatever they could to observe Pesach. It gave them tikva, hope. I can't restrain myself, but I remember my father, alav shalom, that was one of the things that he loved best about the founding President Shul, Harvey. The name, Beth Tikva, a house of hope, as opposed to, well, I don't want to, before Pesach, Lashon Hara, the presumptuous name of a particular synagogue down Bather Street, even south of Holy Blossom. But we were a Beth Tikva. And that is certainly a message that we glean from this holiday. So I'd like to ask you, and again, if you have something to say, remember you can raise your hand or chat, and hopefully I'll notice it. So what is at the heart of Pesach? And more particularly, what is the goal in your eyes of the Seder? I'll say that again. What is at the heart of Pesach? Or if you will, what is the goal of the Seder? And there are no right or wrong answers here. Anybody? Okay, so unmute yourself, Linda.
I'm guessing that it's to transmit the message of the Exodus and the experience of the Exodus to the next generation, the whole door for door.
Okay, for sure. Anybody else? Helen. We can't hear you, Helen. You have to unmute yourself. Okay, while we're waiting for Helen, anybody else?
Raise your hand. It's to tell the story of our freedom from slavery.
Yes? I think the Pacha's
Okay.
trying to
I'm
unmute you, Helen. Okay, she got it.
sorry, I pressed the wrong thing. Okay, I think it's a matter of having your family together and connecting them to each other and to our history and passing that on. And I think under the circumstances that we're under, now, I think the fringe details are not important. I think it's just the essence that we have to make sure we convey.
Okay. Did I see another hand? I thought. Bev. Bev? Not hearing you, Bev. You have to unmute yourself. I saw Stan in the meantime.
I'm just thinking we,
Oh, okay. Bev?
continuity of Jewish history that we, connect. We have to be connected and understand where we came from.
Yeah. Stan?
One word, remember.
Okay, a very important word. All of your answers weren't exactly the same, but they are definitely right on. Jill?
Sharing the tradition, singing the songs we sing every year, drinking the wine we drink, the cup of Eliyahu, all of the traditions that go with the Seder.
For sure. I think I would say that Jill's answer is more to the means by which we tell the story and seek to stimulate a desire to be in this continuum, definitely. So I'd like to suggest, just to say it a bit differently, that we're really looking to expand the lines of our children beyond the here and now. Actually, I have to say, as Batya was doing a lot of cleaning today, I helped, and we were taking things off the fridge. Marlene Axsmith, I don't know if you'll remember, but one of the things you gave me as a goodbye gift was a memo pad, and it said something to the effect of live in the moment, go after everything. And so on the one hand, especially in these days, we're aware of the need to do that, but we simultaneously do that, but also we're in this continuum. I'm sorry, Batya? I'm sorry. We're in this continuum between the past and the present, and I need to put on a picture, one. This is probably the delivery that I was talking about. No, it's the wrong one, Batya. Sorry, guys. Just be patient. What we're going to be looking at is given to us from Yitzhak Tebenkin. You should see that in front of you, who you'll see why in a moment. I'm not going to tell you when he lived, even though I'm saying there that he was a kibbutz founder, an educator, a pioneer. But he says something that I think is really echoing what you people just said. On Passover, every Jew is obligated to ask him or herself, when was I born? Where was I born? What historical memory do I carry with me? Now, this is where it gets very interesting. I look at my identity card, Taudat Zahut, and read the invisible script. My parents were born as slaves in Egypt when Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, ordered the first genocide in history. I too was there. Now, at the very beginning, when I asked the question, so Linda very quickly said, B'chol dor vador. And that, in fact, is the purpose of the Haggadah, Pesach, as you said, placing us in this continuum. Now that in an age where the here and now is so present is a very difficult thing for us and certainly younger people to do. And the question is, how do we give them a sense that it's missing if there isn't a connection to the past? And we'll continue with this as I state a second goal, I think, of the Seder. We tell the story every single year to ensure that our children join in the unfinished work of liberation. I'm going to say that again as we put on picture number 2. We tell the story to ensure our children join in the unfinished work of liberation. The political thinker, Michael Walzer, author of the book Exodus and Revolution, who spent time here at the Shalom Hartman Institute, says the following: the door of hope is still open. Things are not what they might be. We still believe, or many of us do, what the Exodus first taught. First, that wherever you live, it is probably Egypt. Second, that there is a better place, a world more attractive, a promised land. And third, that the way to the land is through the wilderness. There is no way to get from here to there except by joining together and marching. In other words, Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus of long ago, is a paradigm. It was a one-time event, but it is not a one-time event. Whether it's each of us having our own personal Mitzrayim, Egypt, or nationally or globally, the Exodus phenomenon is ongoing. But it's up to all of us, to participate in that liberation. You know, can anybody tell us what Passover is called in the Torah? You know, I just said earlier the various names. What is Pesach called in the Torah? It's not Pesach. Anybody? Chag HaMatzot. Interesting. When it says for 7 days you shall eat matzah, that's for us guys here in the Holy Land. You still have to do it an extra day. Chag HaMatzot. So God called the holiday Chag HaMatzot, but the rabbis, the sages, years later decided that they wanted the Jewish people to call the holiday Pesach for a very interesting reason. Each party, God and the Israelites, complementing each other. In what way? God wanted it to be known that Bnei Israel, the Israelites, the Hebrews, were willing to leave, even if it was slavery. But we all know the unknown can be scarier. That they were willing to leave and go on this difficult trek. So God wanted to recognize that by saying, even just with matzot, they did that. The rabbis wanted to make sure that we remember that God had the part in this. And in fact, you don't see Moshe's name. And perhaps that's not so fair, but there was a need to make it clear that we're not in this on our own. On the other hand, as Walzer points out, God was looking for us to become independent. And perhaps that was the last time, the Exodus, that he was going to perform miracles to make us fight our own battles, ultimately. Now, Walzer reminds me of Rosa Parks, who I'm sure we're all familiar with. Follow along. Why am I thinking of Rosa Parks? Parks in the 1950s in segregated Montgomery, Alabama. Well, educator Herbert Cole urges us to correct what he calls the myth of this African American woman. Why a myth? If you'll recall hearing the story, it describes this woman who gets on a bus and she should not sit in the front because of the segregation, but she does. And when asked to get up and move, she just refuses and refuses. It was described as an incident that it was hot outside, she was exhausted, and therefore she was fed up and just wasn't going to listen to these orders. Well, Cole says the following, and I bring this to emphasize the need for us not just looking for one leader, but we all must be involved. And that it's not just in the heat of the moment, as we studied last week with Eliyahu. So let me just read you a bit from Herbert Cole dismissing Rosa Parks the way the story is told. To emphasize her being tired is another way of saying that her defiance was an accidental result of her fatigue and consequent short temper. Rage, however, is not a one-day thing, and Parks acted with full knowledge of what she was doing. She was not just a simple seamstress who got angry on the bus. When the others in her community heard about this, they became angry too, and they decided to refuse to ride the buses until everyone was allowed to ride together. She was arrested, though. And Parks' arrest brought it about because she was part of the African American leadership in Montgomery and was trusted not to cave in under the pressure everyone knew she would be exposed to. This story isn't just about her, but it is a story of collective decision-making, wheeled risk, and coordinated action, which is much more dramatic than just saying one person did this and because she was tired and angry. An Israeli writer echoes this in our third picture. Amnon Ribak. Kol Adam Tzarich Mitzrayim. Every person needs to have a certain Egypt, to redeem themselves from it, from the house of slavery, to go out in the middle of the night to the desert of fears, to march straight into the waters, to see them open before them to both sides. Every person needs a shoulder on which to carry the bones of Yosef. Every person needs to straighten their backs. Every person needs to have a certain Egypt and a Jerusalem and one long journey that they will forever remember in their feet. Every person needs to have a certain Egypt, to deliver themselves from it with a strong arm or with grinding teeth. Every person needs terror and great darkness, and comfort and promise and redemption, that they would know to look up at the sky. Every person needs one prayer that would always be on their lips. A person needs to bend one time. Every person needs to have a certain Egypt. Ribak is appreciating and urging us, pushing us to appreciate the essence of memory. Somebody just want to give us one reason why memory is so important. Why? And I don't mean the kind of memory to remember why I went into the kitchen, which is already happening to me. What is it about memory? Because that's what Pesach is all about. That's so important. Anybody?
It links the past to the present.
Okay, now that leads us to the next point that I wanted to say. Listen very carefully. Memory is always dynamic. Again, memory is always dynamic. It looks backward and forward simultaneously. It looks backward and forward simultaneously. A superb example of this is in the story in our Haggadah that we read year after year, and maybe have even wondered how significant it is. Well, I'd like to share a reading and interpretation today that I think, again, echoes the importance of remembering that the Exodus is a paradigm and it is a call to always be in the wilderness, i.e., working toward the promised land, whatever that may be. So first we'll read Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer. A tale is told of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar, son of Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Tarfon, who dined and reclined at the Seder in Bnei Brak. The whole night long, they spent retelling the story of the Exodus from Egypt until their students arrived and announced to them, "Our masters, it is time to recite the morning Shema." Now, it appears to be a very simple story. I think quite the opposite. Does anybody want to suggest some questions that arise from reading the short paragraph. Here we have 5 chachamim, 5 of our greatest sages, probably the most famous to us, Rabbi Akiva. So they're reading this, telling the story as they are, because you know that even the greatest of chachamim are meant to retell the story. But what questions would arise from reading it and taking at face value of the details that are said there? Anybody?
Seems to be there are only all these rabbis alone. There's nobody with them.
Absolutely. Rhoda, I think, said that. Okay, now why is that strange?
Because we're supposed to retell this to our children.
Okay, very good. So it seems strange that here they are when we know that we are meant usually to share our seders with our family. And where are the wives? And as Rhoda says, the children, because that is the raison d'etre of the seder, v'shinantam levanecha v'higadeta, and you shall tell the story to your children. So you don't have the family, you don't have the children. Anything else?
It almost suggests that each one of them is telling the story from their own memory and their own perspective.
Yafeh? Okay. That's an interesting reading. Not where I was going, but I'll look at that after.
Why the whole night long?
I'm sorry?
Why the whole night long?
Well, you know, there are seders that I've been at that go till 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, that there's so much discussion. And you would imagine that if you have chachamim, and especially if what Marlene was suggesting, that they're each sharing their own views of things, that it would certainly go on and on and on. Hareza meshubach, that praiseworthy those who do go into detail and discuss. But that leads us to the next point. Okay, why do they need, who's missing, who else is missing? That you
Connection
would
to
think.
the community. Where is the connection from the leadership, the chachamim, to the community that they're meant to serve?
Okay, I would just complete that thought, Sigal, by saying, why are the students just coming now to tell them when it's time to say the Shema of the morning? Why, if the wives and the children aren't there, then perhaps this was just meant for some bizarre reason to be for the elite, then why then aren't the students there? Very puzzling, and it's been a riddle. There is one suggestion that I find particularly significant. This period of time, Rabbi Akiva and the other rabbis are continuing to study, to learn, even though which enemy is at this time that is saying you should not be the Romans. And it is suggested, and this is why it's in Rabbi Akiva's home in Bnei Brak, and he was actually the youngest of the 5, so it would be a bit strange, the fact that he's reclining, because you know that you're not meant to recline in front of your teacher. That's just an aside. But the meeting is taking place in Bnei Brak at Rabbi Akiva's home. Now, what else do we know about Rabbi Akiva other than he studied at a very late age? Well, now it's not so late, in his 40s. He married Rachel, and he was a martyr. One other fact, Rabbi Akiva supported General Bar Kokhba. And he, unlike some others, was urging Bar Kokhba to rebel against the Romans. Now, ultimately, the mission failed, but it was a worthy mission. So they're gathered there, it's suggested, in a very dangerous discussion and setting. So if this is what they had decided they need to be discussing that night, then of course they're not going to want their children and not their wives and even their students to be listening. Because for the most part, this was unheard of, that they would take such an aggressive stand. But the sages realized that they need to put themselves back into history. Now, why did the masters, though, need for the students to tell them that it was morning? Another fact pointing to the likeliness of this discussion, that the rabbis couldn't just look outside a window on their own and see that it was dawn. But they needed the students to be guards, so to speak. And if they were to see the Romans, they would be able to tell them, hide further. But chances are Rabbi Akiva and the others were in a basement. And so they could not see the dawn. This story is a look back at the original Mitzrayim, Yetziat Mitzrayim, and as Walzer says, is looking forward. We've got to get through this wilderness of the Romans. Now, there is another artist, Rachel the poet, Hamishoreret Rachel, who was the founding mother of Hebrew poetry by women. And I believe that she also echoes this realization that the sages had. Okay. The fact that these rabbis, who are usually known to be sitting and learning, the fact that they come to this realization is to be acknowledged. Now, Rachel echoes their realization and adds a touch to it. Kan al pnei ha'adama. Here on earth, not in high clouds, on this Mother Earth that is close to sorrow in her sadness, exult in her meager joy that knows so well how to console. Not nebulous tomorrow, but today, solid, warm, mighty. Today, materialized in the hand of this single short day to drink deep here in our own land. Before night falls, come, oh come all. A unified, stubborn effort, awake, with 1,000 arms, is it impossible to remove the stone from the mouth of the well? Which do you think is the most important thought that Rachel is expressing there? Take a look at it again. You could only see one thought.
To grab on to today and to drink deep.
Okay, now when she says, I agree, to grab on to today, what is she in essence saying? Is she just saying, as I said earlier, the moment? Or what is she pushing us as well to do? And she says it, let's do it today, not tomorrow, before night falls. What is she saying?
To do something before greater danger happens.
Okay?
You sort of have to give your all to do everything that you can.
And not put it off.
Yep.
And not put it off.
We have such a tendency to put off for tomorrow and to delay, and we have to do it now.
I think she's also saying that we can't sit back and wait for a miracle to happen, that what is going to be our future is going to be determined by us here on earth.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to is what I began mentioning earlier, that in the Torah, just as what's beautiful about the Hebrew language, how many different words there are for what one word in English might be, washing. So it depends on what you're washing, whether it's going to be lishtof or lerchotz. And so similarly, the word save in Hebrew in the Torah, there are times that it is loshia and sometimes lahatzil. And that's one of the 5 cups, hitzalti. And the difference, without going into it in detail right now, is for a long, long time, God was the key savior. But then there comes that time that God is saying, I'm not looking to create miracles anymore. It's going to have to happen naturally. And that's that constant dynamic of man having responsibility, human beings being responsible, even though sometimes it would be nice to rely, but you can't have it both ways. And God is pushing human beings to take on that responsibility. You know, when you said, I don't remember right now who, but that you can't wait for it to happen, I think Marlene. So one of our favorite chief rabbis was Rabbi Avram Kook. And what we love about him is that as observant as he was, he risked excommunication because he acknowledged the necessity of the pioneers like Tebenkin. Those that were secular and were not necessarily coming to the promised land because it was the promised land from the Torah, but they believed in Jewish peoplehood. And so Cook understood that you can't wait for the Mashiach, whether it's to bring us through the wilderness to this actual promised land that Bati and I are sitting in right now, or whatever the promised land is in your life. We can't wait for a miracle. We have to act. Sometimes we need somebody to open our eyes for the need. Perhaps Bnei Israel would have stayed put if it wasn't for Moshe helping out God and God really hearing their cries. They were already at a state of being perhaps complacent. A time like this, when we're all spending time differently than usual, causes us to give a lot of thought to what we normally do, what we don't usually do. And I'm willing to bet that some of us have decided that, please God, when this is behind us, we won't do that, or we will do that, A, B, and C. There's a Rabbi Dalia Marks in Yerushalayim who has a beautiful book called Zman. All the special holidays and the non-special days that make up our calendar. And she has an interesting thought, a play on words. And she says, when we're asking the question, Ma nishtana, that's in the passive. How is this night different from others? She says, from that same shorish, from that same root, shin nun hey, we should be asking more than ever, ma nishaneh. Not just why is this night different, but what will we change? Now, another great teacher, Eliezer Schweid, in also a wonderful, wonderful book about Chagim and Shabbat, says that we enter into these special days to return and leave them in a different way. I'll say that again. We spend hours within these special holy days, not just for that 25-hour period, but to leave them when we go back into reality in a different way, with a different mindset. If we spend all this time cleaning and putting the effort, and it's not just physical cleaning, then we just can't let this experience that we're about to experience, Pesach, in the way that we're going to, be anything less than life-changing. There are different views now being discussed that we should not look at Pesach and bring into it at all the special circumstances of the corona. That should not be the focus, and it shouldn't. But how can we not just take a look and say, if we do, and when we do get through this, ma nishaneh. I know everybody that's sitting here is involved with wonderful activities, and I mean that. I see everybody that's here, and I could say things that I know about each of you and things that you are involved in. And we have to pray that we take this opportunity to decide ma nishaneh. And as we said last week, the key to the Seder, as we said in the beginning of this hour, is passing on this story to our children. We have to hope that we've at least done our job. And I think one of the key jobs of parents is to be storytellers. And that no matter what our children decide, we've at least given them baggage in a positive way to go through this wilderness that they will eventually have to go through, no matter what age. it's crucial that we give them this sense that we can continue a meaningful life by feeling that it started with something so meaningful a long time ago with the first Exodus. Now, I'm going to show you something now. That I hope you can see this. If last week we talked about Eliyahu having the job of turning the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to their parents, it occurred to me as I was sitting here one day this week that that message is in this painting that I'm showing you right now. What do you see? This is something that I had actually purchased in Tzfat over 5 years ago, brought it back to Toronto, never took it out of the tube, and when I came back here, now about a year and a half ago, finally took it out of the tube and had it framed. I hope you can see, I think you can. What do you see there?
I see a child grasping a manuscript along with the mother that they share. It's being handed over.
All right, I don't exactly see a manuscript. I'll have to look at that. But you're on the right track. Anybody else?
Well,
I've still got the things you were talking about, the text that you were talking about before up on the screen.
Yeah.
So I can't see you.
Oh, you're not.
Oh, it's where Bracha is, where Bracha's stated.
Wait just a second. Wait, but now, oh, do you see it now?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so try again. There are two images, you know, like those psychological tests that many of us had to go through.
A mother and child are dancing.
Yeah, fed Debbie. Okay, so that's one thing.
It's also very joyous.
It's very joyous. And here, if you're looking at it a little differently, it could be that this is actually Miriam with her timbrel, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you call that? Timbrel? I don't know if you can see it.
It's a tambourine.
Next time I'm in Toronto, I'll bring it so you can see it clearly. I'll take a picture. What do you call a timbrel? The tambourine. And that would, of course, be very appropriate for this class as well, because Miriam was the one that was confident and had faith in the fact that they were going to survive, and that's why the women brought the tupim. But let me just read you the blurb that came with the painting. It's called Baby Steps. This painting, inspired by those amazing moments in life, appears on the cover of a wonderful book about motherhood and parenting from an inspired Jewish perspective. The uplifting moments we so desire and look forward to come across as a dance. Mother and child are literally lifting each other, each full of joy to have the other to dance with through life. Even when life proves less flowing, these positive moments help pull us through. With joy, we have the strength to strive for the best. Maybe we have to have that image as we go through Pesach and this period of time. Before I say one more word, I have a note here. Something happened to my sister's computer. She says Chag Sameach to everybody. Just very personally, I have to tell you that it has been such a joy to spend almost 3 weeks with you now. And it certainly enhanced this time. As always, a real delight and so special to be with our Toronto family. And I wish everybody, please stay healthy and Chag Sameach. And I asked Batya if, because we had done this the first 2 sessions, we sang one song the first session at the end as a prayer, and the second one we did whether I had to. She said, you probably should. So let's put together both songs that we had done as a prayer for us to someday be able to soon sit in the same room together and call upon Eliyahu to bring us the good news that we all want to hear. Hine matov. Unmute yourselves, guys. Unmute yourselves. And I thank Sigal for having arranged this, deeply appreciative, and to my daughter who helped with tech. Chag Sameach, be
Chag
well.
Sameach.
Love you all.
Stay well.
Keep well.
Keep well,
Thank
everybody.
you for your inspiring thoughts as always.
Thank you.
Chag Sameach.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Chag Sameach to all.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Everybody stay safe and happy.
Yeah.
Healthy.
Sameach, Bracha. Batya.
Batya, we miss you. We love you.
Okay, all over.
You gotta leave now.
Ah.